Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. While we wait for the rest of the participants to join, please feel free to download the 360 mobile app and explore its real time features like live FX rates, SFR rates, and updates on the latest happenings at 360 and its solutions. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Akshata Purohit, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the ninth episode of the 360 Business Unplugged series. This platform brings together industry leaders from across various geographies and sectors to discuss business trends and explore areas of interest. In today's episode, we will look into the ease of doing business in India, highlighting end to end support for corporates entering or operating in the Indian market with a focus on compliance and sustainable growth. Now, let me introduce the two distinguished experts who will be having an insightful conversation today. First, we have CA Pankaj Bandra, co founder and chairman of 360 TF. Pankaj has been a trailblazer in the trade finance world with over 2 decades of experience. An early entrepreneur, he has a deep understanding of market dynamics and corporate requirements. Pankaj drives 360 Tier with the purpose of bridging the trade finance gap and meeting the needs of corporates worldwide. Joining him is our esteemed guest, Miss Sri Lakshmi, a distinguished professional with extensive expertise in finance and law, holding qualifications as an insolvency professional, chartered accountant, and company secretary, along with a gold medal in commerce and master's degree in psychology from Ajim Premji. As a partner at Guru and Jana, she leads key functions including India Entry Services, payroll, labor, and HR. Her career includes experience at BMR Advisors, as well as contributions to corporate training, career counseling, and campus placements. A recognized speaker, she has addressed ICAI sessions and appeared on platforms such as All India Radio and Power TV. She also serves as a trustee for CAPS and the Mahatriya Guru Anjana Foundation. Before we begin today's conversation, I would like to invite our co founder and CEO, Mr. Vikram Lodha, to say a few words. Vikram is a seasoned banker with deep expertise in trade finance and technology. He is passionate about leveraging technology to transform business processes, and he firmly believes in its potential to provide solutions to today's challenges. Over to you, Vikram.
Thank you, Akshita. We're off to a great start again, our another business unplugged session, and we have a fantastic person on, the screen with us. So thanks a lot, Sri Lakshmi, for being with us and accepting our invite. We all are eagerly looking forward for this session, and all I can say is a whole host of our participants and customers who are now looking at, and 360TF as an organization, we have customers, many customers outside of India as well, and they are all looking at doing business in India. So there is an inherent, I would say, ask or undercurrent that we want to know more about India and how do we do business here. Welcome once again, and we are looking forward for this session. As on behalf of 360TF as a team, we welcome you again. Thank you.
I'm sure everyone is eager to their thoughts and insights. So over to you, Pankaj and Sri Lakshmi.
Happy evening, everyone, and thank you, Akshata and Vikram, for your kind words and encouraging 360DF team to yet put this together, the ninth Business Unplugged. Thank you, Sri Lakshmi, once again to hear and share your wisdom of experience about how you at Gurujana helping global corporates who are coming and expanding into India, be it startup or a large manufacturing or a trading company. So, once again, welcome and thank you to join us this evening. Now, taking the ease of doing business, I think 6 years or I would say 8 years back, where India was ease of doing business ranking of above 100, we are now between 60 to 63, and I think things have improved with a system like NSWS, the National Single Window System, a fantastic initiative by Government of India, where you have 32 ministry aligned with the National Single Window System, 29 states, where everything is online available, all the policies, so on and so forth. To that extent, the land bank, which is available today online, that if I want to put a aviation project, which state I can go and which state give me the best of the benefit and where I have got the right land. So with this sort of a aggressive step taken by Government of India, where you see, Shilakshmi, that while of course India overall ranking is number, where you see what are the other major reform that has contributed to this growth and which has also motivated the global MNCs to come to India. Shilakshmi.
Thank you, Pankaj, and thank you, Vikram. Thank you, Akshita, Binita, the entire 360 TF team with Saksham. It has been wonderful already interacting with you all to be a part of today's Business Unplugged. I must say, commendable work on how you've brought out this series. A lot of us, while I was trying to understand what Business Unplugged was all about, I was going through some of the earlier videos. Your team has done a phenomenal job, and I understand everything that you are doing is so unique that way. And one of the initiatives of 360 TF is Business Unplugged. So hats off to the thinking minds and the hats behind this entire venture. Pankaj, when I did my, you should probably add something here if you have anything to say.
No, thank you so much. I think initiative like this is not only helping us to share uh, the experiences of the thought leaders like yourself, being the one of the youngest partners who started from scratch and being the one of the youngest partner today in Gurujana. But at the same time, it has helped us to brush up our knowledge skills because whenever we put this together, whether it's I am the host or Akshita or Vikram and Benita and all our team members, a lot of groundwork goes in researching a topic and the subject. And today, when we're talking in the afternoon about the single national which I've spoken about the NSWS, an initiative like this, it was just mind blowing. Which has been led by ex Deloitte professional, Aditya. So if you see, it looks like a team of McKinsey managing Invest India in this initiative, and this is what required by any, I will say, government. So we are quite excited to be part of initiative like this and doing that background work and the research. But yeah, thank you once again, and like to hear from you your thought processes and experience so far on ease of doing business and contribution of you and Gurujana to this.
I would go back to my training and articleship days, Pankaj. Now, what you're talking about, the NSWS, was in fact truly literally one window where we would go stand in the queue, present all our applications, and then government, that is the ministry officials, would approve the name of the company. And the approval of the name of the company used to be the first stage. We had to lodge a challan. That is, we had to go pay a fee at the counter, take a challan, and then put that challan on the application where we had typed out what was the name of the company. So this was how, when I started articleship, things used to work. So there was a lot of manual work that is involved. We've come a really long way on how India has progressed. The index, doing business index, rightly so, has been discontinued in 2019 is what I came to know when I was trying to understand where do we stand on the index currently. From 143, whatever it was when we started in 2014, to whatever we have reached currently, which is the 63rd rank, has been a lot of work which the government has done to do a lot of reforms. Like how you were giving me some trivia on how the scheme came about. This particular index was introduced by three foreign gentlemen. And the very reason why this was stopped is because they were orchestrating the numbers on what should the ranking be. So it has stopped that way. I come from, we as millennials, of course, we know what was the British Raj of the 200 years to the license Raj, which was later, which was the post-independence era. Then came the LPG reforms. And India has got to be where it is in 2014. It is very worthy to know that it has been a decade of transformation. 2014 to 2024 has been a golden decade that way. And government has taken several major steps to enhance the ease of doing business in India, which is, I'm talking about the abolition of license Raj completely. There have been several reforms, of course, no points in guessing here. GST has been one of the major reforms. Startup India schemes have come about. Jan Vishwas also is a scheme that the government has introduced. So these substantial reforms have helped to transition from a fragile economy to a very, very robust economy through a series of policy decisions and the reforms and initiatives that the government has taken. So if I have to put across some simple 4 points on what they have done, it is actually they've simplified the procedures. No brainer here. They had to simplify the procedures. Then they have rationalized the legal provisions. They have digitized quite a lot of processes. Then they have decriminalized a lot of laws, which means people having the fear of going to the jail for every single small thing and wrong thing that they did, they have brought it under the penalty and the fines scheme. So while these four have played a major role, some of the important things that we can see has helped in the reforms. So two parts to your question. First, ease of doing business. India has progressed tremendously. So I wouldn't compare India with the other global economies that are there, though that is the measure of index we all understand. But I would compare the India of the yesteryears to the India of the 5 years back to the India that is today. That is the India that we are talking about, which has eased several lot of things in doing businesses. Actually, personally, I'm really thankful to be practicing in this era of the current government that has come to its third term, where we've seen several reforms and several online procedures and reforms that the government has done. So these online things itself that the government has a vision towards is a total joy to work with. So personally, as a practicing chartered accountant currently in our country, I feel really happy to do. Though we have a long way to go, at least from where to where we have come is quite commendable. Now, looking at the sector reforms, whatever they have done, you look at the financial sector reforms government has done. I think this is very close to what your heart that way. And 360 degree TF is doing phenomenal work. You've got the license in your foreign country, then you're doing business in India also. That way, it has helped people to come to India. The government has focused on restoring financial sector, easing business conditions, and augmenting physical and digital infrastructure. This is the major thing that they have done. They have more importantly brought in these reenactment, that is the SURFACE laws, and the IBC enactment has been very important that way in the BFSI sectors. Then the regulatory framework simplification that they have done is, according to me, RERA was really one of the 2016 laws that they came, has simplified quite a lot of things for the common man, for the home buyers. Then came the taxation reforms. Several taxation reforms have happened and substantial changes, including the adoption of unified GST, reducing. So the GST has unified several laws. Then they have decreased the corporate and income tax rates, and they have removed the DDT completely. So this has also been one of the most important reforms. Pankaj, at any time you want to stop me and add something, I would be happy to hear your thoughts.
Sure. No, no, thank you so much. Yes, as you said, the RERA was a game changer and let us bring a lot of trust by the foreign investor, the REIT fund, the real estate fund outside of India to come and invest. Also for the NRIs, the RERA has been very, very important. So yes, reform like this. Yes, you talked about the BFSI reforms and especially the initiative by Government of India on GIFT City, which is the Gujarat International Financial Center. And I think this is the talk in all the major countries, in the boardroom of all the banks and with all the regulators. the way Gift City have risen, and today, as you speak, anybody with his bank or financial institution applying for a license in Gift City, while there's a one single window as far the licensing is concerned, but there's no real estate space, and that's the, of course, the testimony of the growth of Gift City. Yes, as you rightly mentioned that yes, we have a headquarter out of Singapore with a regional office in UAE in the IFC, and we have been sort of awarded the pre-approved license as an offshore NBFC to help Indian exporters get paid on day one again their export receivable, which we got, the cash is in and receivable is out from the balance sheet. So with God grace, we go live and do our first transaction hopefully in this year. But yeah, the focus is, but now things like this where government have considered us to be part of this growth and journey in Gift City after I will say government owned institution. We are the first private sector company, but that shows the that welcome, and that showed that reform, which I think this is open for everybody, right? Today we have 32 banks in Gift City, and the beauty of the 10-year tax holiday, right? What you're doing is earlier the money from NRIs will come in an Indian bank. Same money on transfer pricing, you will pay a tax on a net profit to a tax authorities. Then same money when you use this to give a ECB loan to a large corporate in India, you again make a profit on which again you pay tax to government of India. Now today, if same public sector bank from India or for that matter foreign bank come and sit in Gift City, the NRI deposit which comes in Gift City now is not taxable for first 10 years, and the same money which now this bank or institution use to do a ECB export commercial borrowing transaction is not taxable. So simply by doing this, it is also have created a more in terms of the NRI the confidence that this is an offshore jurisdiction, and it's simplified the ECB lending, and net there's no tax. So not for a public sector bank it still is fine, but for a foreign bank where they have access to the diaspora, it gives them opportunity to do this business and save tax. So yeah, this is my input on BFSI sector. But coming back and forward, like what we discussed about this various initiative, we all know the Indian story, the way government of India is welcoming, creating the single window, and putting integrating all the ministries and the states. But I'm sure as a chartered accountant and a consulting firm, when you interact with these corporates, definitely I'm sure they will feel some challenges. So what do you think, Shalakshmi, that what could be the challenges or what challenges the corporates have faced, and how firm like yours has been helping these corporate to mitigate those challenges?
According to me, Pankaj, the key challenges can be that different people have different opinions. If you have to draw a parallel, it is like two different doctors having two different opinions about one particular ailment on how to treat it. So you again take cases of different companies. So different companies have, countries have protection systems which are different. In the case of example, USA, their visa is highly guarded because they don't want immigrants to come, and they have a background of a lot of immigrants coming. So right now the visa is heavily guarded. We all know China is very highly entrepreneurship guarded for obvious reasons. Then Dubai is a very open economy. They would allow people to come, do businesses in your country, prosper, flourish. The entire economy is an open economy that Dubai has built today. Take India, for instance. The most important factor in India, if we have to see the journey of how we have got to where we are today, is the terrorism that had ruled the country. So they had like tryst with destiny. Terrorism was quite common, and that's why India has robust KYC norms that they have today. One of the common things I hear from the foreign companies coming to India is they complain about the KYC norms that we have. We as professionals take it on us to, at the initial stage itself, educate them that there is these particular convention nations like Commonwealth nations, which is a part of the Britain rule. Then we have the Hague Apostille Convention nations where US come under this treaty. So different countries coming to India under different regulations are supposed to follow this notary and apostille requirement of documents. And government has played a huge role in bringing KYC into place. So two types can be there. One, you'd get all the KYC and then you get the approval. And before getting the approval itself, you submit the KYC and get the approval. So KYC that way has played a lot of role in ensuring that the anti-money laundering, like the US law has, we have the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So somebody coming to India necessarily needs to know that the KYC norms in our country is very robust for the simple reason that we do not want terrorism financing. And there are a lot of reforms and regulations that are there so that identity theft does not happen, illegal activities does not happen, and terrorist financing does not happen. So navigating the Indian market requires understanding of the nuances. You have to mandatorily know the nuances that are there in the country. Of course, you will have the regulatory hurdles because you have a myriad of laws that are there in the country. If I have to talk a myriad of laws, it is quite mind reeling because you have the company law, you have labor laws, and labor laws are specific to each state because India has central and state, and each state has a different law. And you have to do business with cross states, interstates that way. So you need to know these laws. Then you have the tax regulations. Though we have one income tax across, you still need to know the tax regulation. GST has unified quite a lot. But again, GST has different rates. Then there is interstate and local state GST taxes also. You have to also take care of the data protection that way. And sector specific regulations are quite a lot. So according to me, these are the worries that you will have when you are looking to do businesses in India. And of course, in India, the litigations are higher, penalties and litigations are higher. That's one of the ways to regulate, and that's one of the ways to ensure compliance. In fact, every company that's formed in India is required to have a statutory audit, whereas take the same in the case of US entities or maybe even in Dubai, UAE entities, you don't have a need to do the audits. So in India, it is a question of every regulation has to be followed and every audit has to be completed because the number of companies that are coming to India at any given time are several millions. So to have all the checks and balances in place, it is required for us to follow all these laws. And economic and policy uncertainties are also there in the country. Economic and policy changes can disrupt business operations, and strategic planning can delay your decision making. So economic policies play havoc in this country. While the law is pretty stable, while the law has stood the test of time in terms of the pre-independence era, the independence era, and the post-independence era, still the way the law is regulated is something to be watched out for. So companies need to adapt proactive measures, and that is how they can approach risk management and strategic planning in this country. And the data protection laws, like I was talking already, they are yet to be notified in this country. So same goes with labor and employment laws. Labor and employment laws, I am hearing from the last 5-7 years already that they are going to bring one single code for the entire country. While GST took several years, it was a reality only in 2017. And the single GST law, what we are seeing also, from 2017 to 2023, there have been every year grading changes that have happened in the law on how the law has been implemented in this country. So that, according to me, will be some of the challenges that they will face. Then the digital transformation is one of the most other important things that the country has gone through. India offers extensive opportunities due to digital transformation. Example, UPI, we all know, paved way for a plethora of fintech companies to emerge in India. We could not imagine that we could be a cashless economy, that too so fast, and that too we grew leaps and bounds. And probably we are the leaders in how the UPI economy has taken shape in India. Right from a flower vendor to a person who is outside the temple, who guards the chappals, the sandals of people, also accept UPI. To that extent, the country has become a very UPI friendly economy. So RBI has issued several regulatory frameworks for ensuring that the safeguards are in place by empowering self-regulation. So they have introduced self-regulation on how these UPIs can function. So RBI's idea is to enhance transparency, then accountability, integrity, and consumer protection. And furthermore, two things that are a part of India is when I was talking to somebody in the US, they have committees called diversity and inclusion. Whereas diversity and inclusion is such a part of the ethos of this country. Cultural diversity, we know if every pin code or every street has probably a different every 80 kilometers has a different cuisine that way. So several cultural diversities are there, several languages are there. It cannot be a straight jacket approach that we follow when we come to India. So India requires us to be very savvy of understanding the region, the culture, the market competition that is there. So this, according to me, is important, where people invest in market research before they come to India so that they are very competitive in today's landscape.
No, thank you so much. And yeah, this is a very, very critical point. And when you talked about the diversity, yes, from a perspective of not, I will say, ease of doing business, but for an expansion perspective, you have come, you got a license, your headquarters is in Mumbai or Delhi or Gulf City, but now you want to get into Telangana or Tamil Nadu or Kerala or Punjab, you need to know the local lingo, right? To connect with this, like for example, when we are in UAE, I tell to my team that how many words you have learned in Arabic to get connected with the local Emirati population. Similar way, when I'm managing 30 states, 30 different cultures, as you spoken about the pin code, the 80 kilometer every pin code. So that's also another important, and that is not to do with the legal or compliance of the thing. This is how you understand the culture of the state, and that also require an organization to build a team and create a culture where one you are representation of most of the states which can speak various languages. So tomorrow you can also handle a customer. I think that's uh, is a challenge for every corporate whenever they get into a expansion, get to another country, gelling well with the team member or the hire a right team member. And I'm sure I heard that you also provide the outsourcing HR services and the recruitment. So, do you think this also plays a very important role as a firm, as a consultant, where if I want to, and this I'm not talking about compliance perspective, but since you touched upon this diversity point, that if I have to get into six different states, so let's say I want to go within South India into five states, what sort of a talent you will advise to a MNC or a corporate, which will also help them for a business expansion?
That is a fantastic question, Pankaj. In fact, that is one of the value adds that we do for our clients. When they come to India, we just don't tell them what are the laws that they are supposed to follow, what is it that the compliances that are there monthly, quarterly, annually that they're supposed to take care. But we also advise them on what should be the salary scale that they can offer. Because typically when foreign companies come to India, for them the cost of labor here is still lesser, so we give them a scale of what can be the skilled labor salaries that they can offer. Then people with local language or with local presence here can help them to save costs, because then they don't have to again pay them for staying in separate accommodations, and they have to incur costs back home or and the place they have migrated to. That is something also we encourage them to do. Then we also help them to understand in which place can they set up their offices, where do they have talent availability. Even tier 2 cities are a great option for them today, which they might not have explored because they might feel that they are not equipped enough to go into the tier 2 cities, and the nuances of being in tier 2 cities they do not know. That is also something we help them with. And then the office space, which is the offices that they can rent. And also importantly for them in India, as I mentioned to you earlier, the labor regulations play an important role. So the US laws, the people coming from the West, they don't even have concept of a leave policy. Here, leave policy is state specific, and how many leaves you're supposed to give for a casual leave or a sick leave, and then festival holidays. Those type of things also we educate them, we help them to create their policies. These are some of the value adds that we've done, and it has gone a long way in them appreciating to us. We negotiate rates with the landlords because then they can command better rates when it is coming from somebody locally here. This we believe has been valued by our clients, and we've also found that to be one of the differentiating factors in advising our clients.
Fantastic. Uh, of course, when any corporate is coming, he's coming for a specific sector or a segment. But you also sort of being part of your newsletter, otherwise a specific strategy which you will provide to your clients that what are the specific sector industries where India definitely offers a distinct advantage for a global company versus any other country.
Yeah, India offers that way several there are several sectors where government gives them a good advantage. Take the most easiest for us to understand will be the manufacturing sector, because Make in India scheme that they introduced, they brought down the corporate tax rate to 15% for manufacturing companies to encourage companies to coming to India. Manufacturing industries are much sought after and the need of the hour, and it helps to create employment opportunities. So that way several sectors are benefited. Now, if you look at what are the steps that the international businesses should take to align with the regulatory framework, this I want to little touch on before I go into the sector specific. You need to be patient when you are entering into India. It is not similar to any of the other countries that you would have done businesses with. Simple thing on the KYC norms itself is going to take about a month or 2 months time for the foreign countries to get it right. So that way India has a lot of nuances, and important for you will be, whoever is coming to India, will be that they have to be patient, because it is not very common what India follows. Though laws are in place, it has to be understood very clearly. And this helping understanding can be done by the consultants, good consultants who are familiar with the type of these practices that they need to follow. And what is the purpose behind this process that is in place is a key element. Necessarily, as a user, you don't have to know, but as a provider of service, we understand why these processes are in place because we've seen how it has evolved. So the processes need to be adhered to. A simple thing, Pankaj, one of the clients for whom we had to ask the KYC and also do their digital signature, one of the important fields that we had to fill was father's name. When I asked a particular foreign national to give me their father's name, because it is not a commonly available data in their passports or any of their government documents, that person got really offended. On the next day call, he asked me to come, and I had 5 legal people on the call questioning me why I was asking the father's name of that person. That was when I understood it is not common for people to ask father's name, whereas here it is such a given. In our country, asking father's name is such a given. So there are these cultural shocks, but today people are understanding. Back then, when it all started, it was quite difficult for them to comprehend it. As simple as when driving is the same, you and I know how to drive a car, and driving is the same. But when you go to the US, you have to understand you have to drive on the right and not on the left, what we are used to. So there are different set of rules. So there we are agreeing to follow. Here also we have to know that these different set of rules are there to protect and safeguard them. So as consultants, we do that as a primary role in educating them. And also importantly, we tell them, we will ensure that we are going to follow it for you. Please cooperate in the entire process. And for them, it is simply digitization of documents. All documents that they are supposed to provide to us, they have to provide it in a soft copy format, and we don't even have to bother them to courier those hard copies. So to that extent, quite a lot has been simplified. While all this is in place, some surprises will be there. As good professionals, it is our duty to ensure that we are taking them in the right direction. It's a young and a really large population. India is quite an attractive crowd for them that way. So to do business for them, they have to take care of all this. Now look at the sector specific advantages that are there for what government has given us. The IT and ITS sectors, there are these today India is the global leader for IT and ITES sectors. So large pool of skilled professionals are available for them. So if you have a sectoral advantage that way, you will find skilled people here, not from the government regulatory benefits point of view, but from the skilled labor availability point of view, it is available. And look at the some of the policies that the government has provided them. It is Digital India and National Policy on Electronics. These are the policies that are there, which helps the IT and ITES sectors. Pharma and biotechnology also. Today, India is called the pharmacy of the world. We were the COVID diplomats, we were the vaccine diplomats of the world. And pharma that way has picked up really well. They had introduced the Pharmacy Vision 2020, and production linked incentive schemes are there for the pharmacy sector also. Textile and apparels also have these schemes. They have textile policy and they make it attractive for global companies to be able to come to India. Renewable energy is also one of the in thing. So it is through the evident schemes like National Solar Mission and PLI schemes for high energy solar modules. So this is also advantageous for the renewable energy sector. I already spoke to you about the manufacturing sectors. Make in India is a big thing, and it has helped to reduce the tax rates for manufacturing companies set up after 2019 or so. Then the financial services, IBC and IRDA play a huge role where there is robust framework for these sectoral companies for the BFSI sector. Agri and fruit processing sectors also have an advantage. There are several Pradhan Mantri schemes for the farmers, that is the Kisan Yojanas are there. They are also looked up to for helping us. So these favorable regulatory policies are helping the sector specific companies to do the businesses in India and to also come to India in a large way.
No, I agree, and especially when you've spoken about pharma, textile, apparel, this is also our focus industry from a perspective of receivable finance or factoring or export bill discounting, because pharma and textile apparel play a very important role in terms of the overall Indian exports. And yeah, so good news is that the industries are growing, the foreign investment is also coming into this sector. At the same time, they are also playing a very important role in the growth of the Indian export, and they are also the favorite sector for us to help them discount their receivables. So taking forward, you've spoken about in brief about GST, and I think that has played a very important role in terms of the overall ease of doing business, the GDP. Even today, there are technology company from a domestic financing perspective based on the GST return. You evaluate the credit of a SME company for providing working capital finance and things like that. So, from coming back from that as one of the as a major regulatory reform which we have seen in last 7 years, where you see that today the overall the implementation of GST and reform means I know and you spoke about Make in India as well, but do you think that that has really have played a significant role, especially from also for a global corporate which has come in, how the overall implementation of GST has gone through both for Indian as well as global corporates perspective?
Interestingly, Pankaj, GST came about in July 1st, 2017. So when I was working in my earlier corporate avatar, 2008 and 9 was when GST was the hot word. So everybody got into service tax because GST was coming, but it came much later. But 2017, when it came where it was there to stay. In fact, July 1st is Chartered Accountants Day in India. It's in fact also Doctors' Day. So July 1st that way is significant because the chartered accountants of this country have helped reach GST where it has reached from 11 lakh crores to 20 lakh crores today, which is the collection of GST. They've come a really long way. A significant transformation has happened because they've unified the entire tax structure, and the economic landscape of the country itself has taken a different turn altogether. So GST, if you look at some of the key impact points, the simplified tax structure, I remember a day when each state had different forms that you had to file for the VAT returns. So when we had to file returns of different states, I had to remember which state was what, and there were state specific things that I had to do. Now everything has come under the single unified reform. They have simplified the tax structure also. They've replaced multiple indirect taxes with the single tax. That is one of the important things that they've done. And they've simplified the tax system and reduced the compliance burden. By bringing in a unified structure, the compliance burden has reduced. As I mentioned to you, several different forms have taken away. Probably the very important aspect also of GST has been that they've eliminated the cascading effect. By allowing the the input tax credit, the cascading effect has helped to reduce the overall tax burden of the people, and they have also reduced the pricing also, because the whole idea is input tax credit is going to get passed on and the cost also is going to come down, and the overall tax burden has reduced. Look at the unified market. Single rational market is there. So interstate barriers are removed and promoting seamless trade. They promote seamless trade to ensure that across the country there is a single rate of tax that is getting followed. Single rate of tax again is 5%, 18%, 3%. These rates of taxes are still there, but overall the regulation mechanism has become simpler. Each state used to have different forms, now that is removed. This, according to me, from a compliance point of view, reduced quite a lot of burden. And improved compliances are there. I mentioned to you that today we stand at 20 lakh crores of GST that got collected. Parallelly, the economic growth has not happened in a similar way. What I mean to tell you here is, like how the GST tax grew, the rate at which the economic growth happened also did not happen, which means that the unregulated markets, which were not there in the GST regime, started coming into the GST regime. So this has helped to keep the stability of growth and inflation and GDP. Overall, how the economy is playing has got help through having GST in the country. I also remember we used to have to send forms for various checkposts to clear the goods. Now, through introducing the e-way bill, they have taken away the requirement of checkpost regulation also. And cost savings, because there is reduced logistics on the entire thing, the costs have saved and streamlined supply chains are there together. So the logistics costs have reduced and the supply chains are also seamlessly happening. This, according to me, is some of the very important things that have happened because of GST, while there remains quite a lot more to be said. Now, talking of the Make in India, which we already touched on, it has enhanced manufacturing capabilities within the country. Job opportunities have increased. FDI, what it was earlier, from what it is when it's 45 billion to, I think I have some numbers, to 700 billion in FDI today. All that also has happened because of the advantages relating to how the regulatory framework of the country has happened. Job creations have happened. Then, because of the entire way this tax is getting structured, the exports are more, and we have had global market recognition. So India can export today to several countries. The whole idea is we have become self-reliant also. The Vande Bharat trains that we produced and the aircrafts like the Vikrant that we did, whole lot of things that India is doing, we have become self-reliant and our dependency on the imports has reduced. This has helped several sectoral growths to happen, the electronic sector, the pharma sector, automotive and textile sector. Overall, you can see quite a lot of growth has happened across the spectrum. Pankaj, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. So moving forward, as toward the last section today, you just touched upon on the import, and I think one of the important thing for any foreign company or investor is the FX, the foreign exchange rate. Because today I'm investing, bringing my dollar where rupees maybe 82, 83, 84 whenever I come and invest it, and when I repat my dividend or bring my capital back, the currency would have devalued, right? So we're seeing that currency depreciation is happening year on year. That's become the one concern from the investor perspective. Yes, if I'm into export, then I'm trying to manage my hedge between the import and the export. So one is, of course, that comes in that how do I have the best mechanism for the FX, right? Second is the managing my import and export and the trade finance, right? So if I'm bringing the import into the country, how do I safeguard and give assurance to the foreign supplier or the foreign bank that it is will be paid on time? And if I'm exporting, then I want to ensure that my dollar come back to the country by using various mechanism or maybe doing supply chain finance. So while I can of course touch upon this because that's the subject which comes or very close to my heart, but do you think that also your corporates, your clients see some challenges on export finance or in FX, which you counter, and I'm sure you will then look for a solution with firm like 360TF and others. But what's your view on international cross-border finance on FX issues for the foreign companies in India?
Mostly we deal with software companies, and from the FX issues point of view, what we largely want bankers to support us with is good forex rates. And most of the clients that we work are the captive sector clients. So for them, getting a good deal on the forex is very, very important. So here, we reach out to companies like you, and you give us solutions. So that is a space which we do not necessarily understand, and you giving us those solutions would be very supportive for the ecosystem.
Thank you. No, that's very important. Yes, we've been working on with various of partner banks and institutions to one to get help client get the better FX rate at a faster speed, and second, the same time, we helping corporates to mitigate this risk through our one of the world largest marketplace for letter of credit, which where we see a volume of upwards of $500 million per month. So that has played a very important role. And secondly, of course, we are also assisting the SMEs on the export bill discounting, which I spoken earlier. So yeah, I think the financial services system and the banks and the institution and platform like us plays a very very important role when it comes to cross-border trade finance. So the last question, and then of course we go to the audience. Where you see from the overall growth perspective on the service sector. So we have spoken about manufacturing and we did spoke about the service tech, but do you think also, you've been based in Bangalore and we've seen that it's been hub for the service industry, whether it's BPO, KPO, this thing, and this has just come to me as impromptu. There, do you still think that India has still that advantage or the arbitrage of cost of white collar or blue collar workers from the perspective of we still have supporting the US companies, be it for a TPA or the processing of the pharma bills or the insurance or the finance and account income tax returns. I know a lot of chartered accountants are involved for filing returns for the US resident and so forth. Do you think with also increase in cost of living in India, which we all have seen, and there are a lot of this talk about, while we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat or Make in India, every country post COVID, be it UAE or US and all, they all want to, focus on their own economies and bring more and more talent and work and so on and so forth. As I live in UAE, we've seen that. So where you see there is still an opportunity for the service sector, and secondly, where you see the challenges for this service sector, where do you think that we continue to serve the US corporates or European corporates from the perspective of BPOs and the KPOs?
So, I don't know if you're aware, but recently Narayana Murthy told that we should work 70 hours a week. So that I feel would be the advantage how India is placed, because we are a very hardworking country. So by that means itself, we would have an advantage, no matter people bringing focusing on their own economies. The ecosystem and the ethos of India is in such a way that you have a lot of hardworking crowd and demographics. So the young working crowd still are the ones. Maybe The accounting profession still has the hardest working people that way because the compliances are far and wide. So this is one of the advantages that we would forever have. And the education system in India has improved tremendously because the number of universities that are there today and good quality education with the national education policy also that has come about. These are some of the plus points that are there in the favor for our country never to run out of people coming to India and to do jobs, or for us to create jobs here. Interestingly, we have had three of the larger companies doing reverse flip, that is Grow, Pine Labs, and Phone Pay. So these companies also did a reverse flip where they made sure that the India is going to have the holding structure advantage. Lot more patents have got filed in India as opposed to what used to happen earlier. So for sure, we have capability within the country. Plus, we have several innovative technologies that are accompanying to space technology, to deep technology, several technologies which are within the country talent that is available. So India that way would definitely have an advantage from the way the economy is placed, for to also consider the fact that a $3 trillion economy, and within the next 2 years itself we'll become a $4 trillion, and very later we will become a $5 trillion economy. So India is poised in a really beautiful shape. What took 7 years to reach a trillion now is reaching in less than 2 years. So India that way is here to stay and would have a lot of opportunities for people to come here and do businesses no matter what the sector it be.
No, no, very important point, and I think that went viral when we talked. Narendra Modi talked about the 70 hours, and I think this is very important from the perspective of the market, which is more mature market or US or Europe. I'm sure when they grew maybe 50 years back or 30 years back or maybe 100 years back, I'm sure they would have worked hard 70, 80 or 90 hours. Probably they want to work maybe 35 hours now, and that's not bring the cost arbitrage versus the currency or the hard currency versus soft currency. But this is also a very, very important point which you brought in, the arbitrage of the commitment of the young population of India, which is the growth aspirants and who is willing to commit to for their growth. And as we were just discussing along with my co-founder Vikram, that if today we see if anybody is there in the big cabin or anybody holding a CEO post, when you speak to him, maybe he's spending maybe 20 hours a week in the office and playing golf. But where he have reached today, where he is, I'm sure he would have put in an answer will come. I put in those 100 hours or 70 hours and more than that when he was at a young age between maybe 25 to 40. So that's I think very very important arbitrage which we have with a young population of India, and I'm sure that is going to play a very very important role. So let's we have of course quiz in the Q&A. So we maybe quickly take up the questions which has come from the audience, and then we go to the quiz to see what our audience have learned. So I think the first one I see here is uh, what are the essential steps, or is there a basic checklist of top three things that corporate can follow when entering the Indian market?
This is a fantastic question, Pankaj. In fact, very clearly, I would say people coming to India typically go in the two routes, Pankaj. One, they go through word of mouth references. Two, they go to law firms. So law firms, while they have the capability to handhold to create a charter document, overall later what follows is how the compliance has to be formed. Forming a company is the easiest thing. The next that follows on what are the compliances that a company needs to follow is the most important thing. A checklist will be there, but so far you will find a lot of checklists. But importantly for companies coming to India, they have to know India has something called as a resident director concept, which means you need to have somebody placed here in India, which is staying for 180 days or more. Can be a foreign person, but somebody on the ground for 180 to 182 days or more is important. You also need to have a registered office. A lot of countries work on virtual office or registered agent offices. Here, you need to have a physical place of business. That is mandatory for them to have a place of business in India. Then the other important thing will be to have a capital structure in place. So you have to have who is the shareholder of the company. So while these three things play an important role, working with the right consultants to ensure that you are able to start business in India in the right format is important, because forming is the easiest thing. To undo that when some wrong has happened is quite difficult. And to also know to shut down a company, giving birth is easier than actually killing a, a baby. So that's how company formation and uh, end is difficult. And also, India takes time right now to incorporate its company because of the reasons of KYC norms. So these are some of the things importantly to be known. And the banker which they need to choose is also very, very crucial, Pankaj. India doubles up as a regulator, bankers doubles up as regulator, which is a very alien concept. So the bank, you need to go through the banking channels for you to even be able to get approval from the central bank, which is the Reserve Bank. This I feel is important.
Fantastic. I echo with you, and I think while there's a lot of ease of business which we heard of it, I think when it comes to credit and now today just to open a bank account, and it's not only India, I think across the globe opening a bank account become challenging, and I think that's where the compliance thing comes in place. And secondly, of course, getting credit, getting a project finance also become very very important. So this is, I think, again, where we as a firm 360 TF and firm like Gurujana plays a very important role. Tell me something, how, I mean, just I want to just quickly touch upon is how does the corporates or the MNCs uh, get to know about when they come to India? One is that you mentioned about the word of mouth, but how do they get to know that there's someone like Gurujana based in Bangalore and another part of India who can assist them on this? Do you get these leads from global network? How does it works?
You rightly said that, Pankaj. Global networks play a very, very important role. Global networks help us to get references from the similar minded networks or similar scale networks who we work with. So, one, it is coming from known sources. And for them, that they are coming through a known source and working with us gives them that comfort. So, these global networks are there. There are top ranked networks, and each state has a presence, each country has a presence through these networks. So networks play an very important role. We are bound by the regulations of this country, where as a CA firm, we cannot advertise. So advertising is not there. We have to creatively do so. Maybe through these webinars that you do, we can educate people, and working with other disciplinary firms. VCs and law firms are a very important feeder for us, because they are a proof of the works that we would have done, and they typically send us references. Law firms, VC firms, these online webinars and the global networks have played a key role, and a good website also.
Fantastic. Luckily, in a platform like 360T, we don't have any restrictions, so we get a lot of leads as we discuss, through social media, especially through LinkedIn. And as we speak, hopefully by end of this year, will be 100,000 family of followers. But that play a very very important role. So for that, I will ask my colleague Saksham, who lead this initiative along with my colleague Benita, to put in a quiz to just to recap and know that we know to each other better, and so very quick one. I hope I can answer, or they don't allow me to answer, but I'm sure the team can answer here. Our colleague here, Akshita, has given the introduction. She actually was honored with the gold medal for her outstanding academic achievements by one of these veteran business entrepreneur. She got awarded. So let's see who is answering this first. The guest in the audience. Okay, maybe if I'm not sure if I will be able to see it here online. And the second one is Sri Lakshmi is currently partner at 1, 2, 3, big three, or Gurujana. What is the India's ranking in the ease of doing business index as per last 2020 2020, which was she mentioned also that was the last time when this index was done. Last one looks very, very interesting. Which country ranks the highest in terms of ease of doing business among the following? This is looks tough one, not easy one. Qatar, India, Indonesia, Luxembourg. Okay, so fantastic. So Saksham, can we see the result? Fantastic. I think I can see yes, you got awarded from Mr. Aziz Premji. Of course, you work with Gurujana. India rank in 2020 was 63, and between this is also something we can say we moved from 100 plus to 63. But when we talk about one of the best financial jurisdiction, we all talk about Luxembourg and countries like Qatar, but I think we are ahead of them. So that's one of the another proud moment as a country, as in India. So I think let's see if anything has come up. Otherwise, Akshita, I welcome you back to close today's session. But once again, Chilakri, this was very interesting to hear from you, and thank you once again. I think our team now knows when we're dealing with the global corporate, if anybody is coming to India first time and expanding, we know that whom to shout. That's Sri Lakshmi Gurujana. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pankaj.
Thank you. Thank you to insightful speakers for sharing their expertise and wisdom with us and answering the questions as well. For those who joined us late, we are glad to have you here. And if you haven't already, please download the 360TF app to access real-time FX, SFR rates, and connect with LC issuing banks. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who joined, and thank you to the speakers again.